Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Bianca from yarnspirations.com, and I am joined here by your host, Catherine, from the Yarnspirations design team. Today, Catherine is going to be teaching you how to crochet a bright market bag using Caron Cotton Cakes yarn. Just a heads up before we get started that this class is being recorded, so if the pace of the class ends up being a bit too quick for you for whatever reason, or if you'd like to rewatch any piece of it, you'll be able to find the recording up on michaels.com/classes or the Michaels YouTube channels within 24 hours. So now that we've covered our introductions, I'll pass it over to Catherine to get started.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Bianca. Just as a note, there is a link in the chat to the updated version of this pattern. There was an error in the pattern and it had to be corrected, and there is a Dropbox link in the chat to the corrected version. It should be up on our website live very shortly, but in the interim, we can refer to that link in the chat. Okay, I guess if you want to switch it to hands now, I can start reviewing the pattern. All right, so this really fun market bag is made out of granny motifs that are joined together. You make 13 motifs in total. Just to advise you, our current put up of cotton cakes is larger, so you will only need 2 balls of our current put up of cotton cakes for this rather than the 4. As you can see, the techniques used in this pattern are all pretty basic, as you can discern from the abbreviation list here. Not a whole lot of stitches you need to be able to do. So this is a great, maybe second project. Once you've gotten comfortable with working the basic stitches, it should be really straightforward. So I've got cotton cakes here, and I believe this shade is Peach Blossom. But first, I'm going to demonstrate it in a slightly different yarn. So you can really get the placement of the stitches. So I will work it up in the cotton cakes on a 5mm hook slightly later on. For now, I'm going to do a swatch in Bernat Maker, which just has a bit better stitch definition for the purposes of video. And I would like everybody in the comments as well to join me in wishing a very happy birthday to Keely, who is turning 10 today. She's 10 years old and loves to crochet, so let's all wish her a happy birthday together. Thank you so much for joining us on your special day, Keely. So we're starting with a slip knot. And we do have videos for beginner crochet. If you need help with techniques like slip knots and chaining and single crochets, will be excellent for you to refer to that. I will go over this twice. And just remember, you can rewatch this later too. So again, starting with a simple slip knot. I'm going to chain 2. And with this starting chain, I'm going to work 4 single crochet into the second chain from my hook. So not including the stitch on the throat of the hook. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we'll close that into a ring with a slip stitch in the first single crochet we made. So we have our little starting ring here, essentially with 4 stitches. So for our second round, and this is where the correction in the pattern is, so be mindful in this second round, we're going to chain 1, and we will work 4 single crochets into each single crochet to come out with a total of 16 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we've got 4 single crochet stitches in our first stitch from that previous round. So working into our second stitch, we'll do the very same thing. We'll work 4 single crochets into our second stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, so we're halfway around, and we'll do the same thing into the next 2 stitches. So we're doing the same thing in each stitch around. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And to finish the second round, I'll do that again. But I'm seeing that some of you are still lost, so let's go through this really slowly. So starting with a slip knot. And I'm just going to work a beginning chain, a starting chain of 2. This is a slightly unusual way to join in the round, is to start with this chain of 2, but it does make sense ultimately, even though it's a little unorthodox. It's a really great method. So into the first chain we made, the second chain from our hook, we're going to work 4 single crochet. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you might have to coax it a little bit to be perfectly round at this point, because it is only 4 stitches that you're trying to join in the round. But I'm going to join that with a slip stitch into this very first single crochet that I worked. And draw that through. And I cinch it up a little bit tight just to really encourage that to morph into that round shape. And so that's your starting round setup. And once you've done that little ring, you'll start working 4 into each around this. But we're working all 4 of our first single crochets into that first chain. So this very first chain you worked, the second one from your hook, you're working 4 stitches all into that same stitch. And you don't need an additional chain there because that's what the second chain you made is for. That's your sort of starting returning chain. So 4 single crochet all into that 1 stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. And to get that into the round, join it up with a slip stitch into that very first single crochet you made. And so you should have 4 single crochet stitches joined in the round. Do a chain 1 and working into that same stitch that closed, that I joined with a slip stitch here to close the loop. I'm going to do 4 single crochet into that 1 stitch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's all in my first stitch, the same stitch that I used to slip stitch the circle closed. And so now I'll move on to the next single crochet and work another 4 single crochet here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then moving on to the 3rd stitch and working 4 more single crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then finally into my last stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once I've got my 16 single crochets, I join with a slip stitch to the first single crochet in the round. Okay, so for our 3rd round, chain 1, I'm working into your first stitch, just do a single crochet, but you're also going to form one of your corners now. And so what you're going to do is chain 3, just like you would for your starting chain. Chain 3, you're going to skip this next stitch here and work a single crochet into each of the next 3. 1, 2, and 3. Another chain 3, skip the next stitch, so skipping that stitch, and then I'll be working 1 single crochet into each of these 3. Okay, and the same thing once again. Chain 3, skip a stitch, seeing into these 3, and 1 final chain 3. And on this final leg, I'll skip 1 again, but then only seeing into the last 2 stitches. and joining it to the first single crochet with a slip stitch. So now you can kind of start to see how this is going to come together ultimately. It's this third round that's really important because you're squaring off your circle with these chain 3 spaces. And from here forward, it gets pretty easy. So you've chained 1, and you'll just work 1 single crochet into your first stitch, setting up the pattern for the remainder of the square. You, in each corner chain 3 that you set up, you'll be working 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC. So maintaining that same corner setup, and then you're just single crocheting into every existing stitch between your chain 3 spaces. So in each corner space, chain 1 or SC1, chain 3, and 1 SC. And then I'll work single crochet stitches along this side to the next corner.
Well, Catherine, we have a bit of a question here. So I know when you're working, say, flat, you'll do a chain 1 as your turning chain. But when you're crocheting in the round, does that chain 1 kind of serve the same purpose?
It serves a slightly different purpose than it does. But ultimately, when you're using a chain at the beginning or end of a row or a round, it's either allowing you to turn the work or it's building up height for that next stitch. It's just, yeah, it's aligning you height-wise with where you need to be so that your stitch doesn't get distorted when it's worked, if that makes sense. You'll see sometimes we do go without, in rounds, we do without the starting chain, and then your work turns into a spiral, which is a different effect. So I've gone through a couple of corners now. So just 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC in each corner, and a single crochet in each stitch. So for every round you work from here forward, you're adding 2 stitches to each side with the way that you're working your corner spaces. So this chain, 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC that's in the corner, each of those SCs will get added to your row count in the following row. So right now this row has 3 SC, and I'll know that the next row will be 5 and 7 and so on. So while this isn't a project that requires you to keep a meticulous stitch count, it can be helpful to just spot check every once in a while to make sure things aren't going askew. Okay. So I'm going to try to demo this again in the actual yarn. So hopefully now you've got a grasp of some of the principles, and we can walk through that again. I know a lot of people, based on comments, seem to be struggling with this starting principle. So starting with that slip knot, and then chaining 2. And once you've got those 2 chains, you work 4 single crochet all into that first chain. So when you're doing your starting chain, definitely make sure that you're not crocheting overly tightly, as it could then be really tricky to get 4 stitches into your first chain. And so you kind of want to, while you're doing that, be mindful of how you're shaping your work and try to work your stitches around that one chain, if that makes sense. I'll try to demonstrate it a little more clearly maybe. So for my first stitch that I work, out of the 4 I'm doing into this same chain, I'll kind of orient it like I normally would when working a stitch. But then as I do the next 3, I try to kind of rotate the work a bit. So now I'm sort of working oriented towards the bottom slip knot. And then pivot it slightly more, so you've almost done a full rotation to the start of that first stitch. Because you want this one little round of 4 stitches to curl onto itself. Then you join with a slip stitch to your first single crochet, and you're set up to work in the round now. So I'll chain 1 for my second round, and I'm going to work 4 single crochet into each of these 4 stitches to give me a final round count of 16 stitches.
So Catherine, we're wondering if this is a project you'd recommend using stitch markers for?
You could, but to be honest, by the time that you get to your 3rd round, it's really easy to stay oriented based on where your chain 3 corner spaces are. Like once it's been squared off, it's really easy to keep count. So you could use stitch markers, but honestly, the setup, once you've done this setup, it's so intuitive that I don't think you need them, but there's no reason why you can't use them. Okay. Another 4 on the next stitch. One, 2, 3. And as a rule, I'm a pretty obsessive counter when I'm crocheting, so I do like to do a round count every once in a while. 2, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 stitches, perfect. So we'll join with a slip stitch. And And I'm ready to start my third round here. So with a chain one SC into the same space as my slip stitch, and then chain three. Now when I do my corner chain for this particular project, I definitely pull my chains a little bit tighter for the corners for a project like this that I know might have some weight on it. And I like my bags to be very sturdy. So I find keeping your corner chains just a hair tighter than you normally would helps maintain the integrity of your squares. So I'm doing another corner, chain three, skip the next stitch, and then SC in each of the next three stitches. I'm getting to my final corner. So I will work another chain three, but noting that since I started the round with one single crochet, I'm only doing two to complete my final row essentially along the top here. And then joining with a single crochet to the first, joining with a slip stitch to the first single crochet that you've done. So again, you can see how you're squaring out from that original circle a little bit. And as I mentioned, this is why you don't really need stitch markers for this project, because now you know every time you get to a corner, you're working one SC, chain three, one SC in each corner, but you're maintaining, just working SCs in all of the existing SCs. And so I'll chain one. I'm doing one single crochet in each stitch to the corner. And then in my corner, one SC, chain three, one SC in the corner. Okay, I'm at a corner, one SC, chain three, one SC. And so I'm seeing questions about how many stitches until the corner. So for right now, we have, as I mentioned earlier, like 3 stitches between every chain three from our third round. So for every section between the 2 chain threes, you have 3 SC to work. The only time this becomes a little bit murky is at the beginning of your round, since you're starting partway through. So right now you're starting with 1 SC before you get into your first corner space. But that will increase as you go up in rounds. Just be mindful, I guess, that when all is said and done, you should have the same number of stitches on each side of your now square. And for the most part, those are easy to discern. Just be mindful when you're doing your final leg that you're adding in the same number of single crochets as each other row has. And honestly, if you find that your stitch count is off by 1 or 2 stitches, you've got one side that's not shaped up correctly for a project like this, you can fudge it. You know, you can always do a decrease or an increase, and in something this scale, nobody's ever going to know but you. So back to a corner. So I've done 1 single crochet. I'm going to do 3 chains and 1 more single crochet. And here I'm going to do 2 to get me to the beginning of the round. And you're going to do that same round over and over again, essentially. And you're adding 8 stitches essentially to the entire perimeter every time. But the premise is the same. So I'm going to try that again in the larger sized yarn to see, because there are still questions.
So Catherine, just wondering, so this pattern, it doesn't seem like there is a crochet diagram for the motif. So is that, why would we include one in a pattern, I guess, in general? Why wouldn't we include one for this one, or what's the thing?
Yeah, no, I have requisitioned a chart to be drawn for this, just because there was a bit of confusion, and I'll make sure that that's added to this pattern when it's finally loaded to the site.
Okay, great.
So I'm just starting out the same way as I did previously. So those 4 single crochet in that first chain, the second chain from hook. Joining with a slip stitch. Okay, 4 stitches, moving to the second round, 4 stitches in each of the 4 single crochet you worked already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. Now setting up the squaring of the circle. Okay, 1 single crochet in the same space as the slip stitch that joined the row. To set up the corners, it'll be a chain 3, skip 1 stitch, then an SC in all the next 3. Doing that again, chain 3, skip a stitch, 1 SC in each of the next 3.
And Catherine, are you back using our Maker Home Deck yarn?
I am using Maker just because it's so much clearer to demo with. So this should be in Cotton Cakes, but I am cheating a little bit. So I'm just finishing this 3rd round. Slip stitch that, okay. So right now, it's rows of 3 stitches separated by those chain 3 spaces. Into each of these single crochets, I will work a single crochet. Into each of the chain spaces, I'm going to work 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC. And we'll remember that our first row, our first set of stitches here at the top, it's slightly split. So I'll work 1 single crochet into my first stitch of the round, remembering that I'll then have to work these 2 when I come back around. I'm going to do each corner 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC, and then work into each of those single crochets in between. So now that I've done the 3, I'm in a corner, so I work a 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC corner. Okay, 1 SC, chain 3, 1 SC, okay. So I'm asking, somebody's asking, should there be 27 stitches between? Let's see. Sounds correct, but let me check. Yes, there should be 27 stitches between the corners by the time you're finished the 16th round. And so now I'll start again, and I'm going to now, I need to chain one and do 1 SC to the corner. And now I'll do my same corner space. And it's, again, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to keep track of your stitch counts. I know that because I had 3 stitches between each corner in the previous round, I'll now have 5. So I know that I need to work in all 5 of these stitches, being mindful of the fact that in the previous round, the first and last stitch were the corner stitches from the previous round. Okay, and once I've done those 5, it's the traditional corner, and then 5 more. And so from each round from here forward, you're set. So I'm seeing a question that's actually really interesting. Eileen is asking if there's any way to strengthen the straps on a bag like this, which I think is a really good question. What I personally have done for a couple of bags is I've crocheted or knit the actual fabric for the strap, but then used cotton webbing on the inside and tacked that down, which has helped. But I'd love to hear if people have strategies or techniques for strengthening straps on bags in different ways. So I'm on my sort of funny split row. Then I'm going to join, and I worked 2 stitches at the beginning, so I worked 3 SC at the end to get my 5. And so it comes together pretty quickly. And yeah, once you have the pattern established, it's pretty straightforward to work up.
Sounds like others are fans of lining your handles with sounds like grosgrain ribbon.
Grosgrain, yeah. That's a good idea.
So wondering if you've just lined your straps in the past, or would you recommend maybe lining the whole thing with a fabric?
You could definitely line the whole thing with fabric, but that said, I kind of like how a knit or a crochet bag kind of conforms to its contents or whatever. Like I like that property. So I don't usually line the entirety of bags. But if I were doing something small, that's a really great idea, like for a pencil case or something. But just if you are lining with a bag, lining a bag, make sure that you've laundered both the fabric and the project in the way that you intend to launder it going forward. Just be mindful of pre-shrinking everything. Okay, so it's not quite as pretty as it would be in the cakes, but I think the maker does a good job of showing your stitches. So you can see exactly what's happening here. We've got kind of an eyelet in each corner where that chain 3 space is. And you know, it all looks pretty uniform in terms of width. So as you can see, we're expanding outwards, and that's how it should be working for you. Now, you don't have a ton of time, but I'm just gonna snip that off right there. When you're done all your squares and you're ready to seam, I personally, for something like this, would use a whip stitch. And what you'll do, I don't have 2 matching squares in Maker, but that's okay. So just using your actual yarn, I will hold my squares with their wrong sides facing. And so we have a chain 3 in the corner. So starting from that chain 3, the middle chain, for each, I try to grab the back loops only and pull my yarn through. It's not feeding particularly gracefully. And then as I go down, I'm matching each stitch and picking up the back loop only of each stitch. Just whipping around these back loops only. Hoping you can see that somewhat. So again, leaving the front loops of the stitch alone and just going through the back. And I find for these types of projects, you don't have to do anything fancy. As long as you're working in back loops only, this is pretty invisible. And
we have, I think, pretty good questions here. One about blocking, which is one of my favorite topics of conversation. Is this a project you would recommend blocking before you're joining, or would you kind of block the whole thing as one big piece once everything's assembled?
I would probably give each individual square a little bit of a blocking before assembly, just to make sure that everything was the same size. Our tensions can vary on a daily basis depending on how stressed we are, how many glasses of wine we've had while crocheting. So I like to make sure everything's uniform, because you want to make sure all your edges are the same before joining. But I know this is a very tiny, silly little sample, but you can see that working through those back loops, your front loops are free and you don't notice the stitching below.
So if someone was having a bit of trouble kind of understanding when you're saying your wrong sides are facing, how would you help them kind of understand which side is your wrong side, which is your right side?
That's a really good question, and maybe this is where stitch markers or safety pins could come in handy. For something like this that's worked in the round, sorry, it's with right sides facing, I misspoke. With something like this that's worked in the round, the right side is always the side that's facing towards you. So when you set down a square, you're completed a square, you might want to put a safety pin or a stitch marker in the right side of the work so you know what the right sides are when you're done. But as you get more experienced in crocheting, you can kind of tell what the right sides are. But yeah, you want to have, sorry, your right side's facing. If I said wrong, I misspoke, but because you want to make sure that it's the loops that you're sewing through that are the furthest away from the face of your work. And the reason we differentiate between right side and wrong side, even for something like a simple single crochet project, is there's a slight discrepancy in the way that single crochet looks from the front and the back. And so you just want everything to be uniform. So yes, that's a really great tip, actually, Shirley. For the right side of the work, look for the V shape to your stitches, because the legs on the front are a little bit closer together and they look more like a V. That's a really good tip. Okay, so I don't know if there are any other questions, or I'm seeing some questions about whether or not you would work through both front and back loops. You certainly could stitch these together using both front and back loops. It's going to be a little bit more prominent, but if you are worried about the strength of your bag, then yeah, you could definitely work them through both loops. Unfortunately, I don't have a finished version of the bag to show you. It's still in a warehouse somewhere. But definitely those of you that finish, post them on social, use the hashtag Yarnspirations or Michael's so we can see all of your work.
Awesome. And so I don't think we have a class on blocking yet on the books, but it sounds like that's probably in the works.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay, that's all I've got for today. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone.